Happy New Year! This is Adventure Argonaut. This week, I'm not going to do Tuesday News Day or the Golden News. I'm doing something different, new segment called Argonaut Argues. I'm gonna be discussing um, a social issue, a political matter, call it what you will, and but it is still very much related to one particular event from the past week, and especially the immigration question and H1B or whatever, Elon Musk, all that stuff, and I'll also gonna discuss it, but I'm just checking that my streams are running. Yes, haven't been banned yet. Okay. So it's working. I assume. Let's check this one still. Or all the streams should be working. Okay. Let's have a drink. And since it's New Year's Eve, I'm drinking some soju, some Korean rice alcohol or something. This one is a bit too sweet and not in a good way. But anyway, so the topic of this, my first argument, Argonaut argues, is Nazism or fascism that is seemingly rising in the Western world again. And well, first, I'm going to say that. So yeah, this is fascism, and I chose to illustrate my points with fantasy pictures. I thought, instead of using dry historical pictures or anything like that, I'm gonna dress it up in a fantasy framework. It's gonna look nicer. But anyways, I'm not a fascist like the title says, but I label myself political atheist, and it's a silly term. It doesn't sound good, but people know what it means. I've heard the a long time ago on the internet, and it basically means that I try not to get too uh, emotionally or intellectually attached with any political ideology, but certainly that isn't to say that I think all ideologies are equal or anything like that. Some are better than the others, but none of them is perfect in my opinion. But still, my I guess my preference would be, if I had to pick some political system, I would say feudalism, because it worked for a millennium both in Europe and East Asia. That and even more than that, even more simply put, I would say aristocracy is the best system. But that's sort of like a cop out, because aristocracy just means that it's ruled by the best. And the question, of course, would be, okay, who are the best, and how do we ensure that these best are in charge of our societies? So in that sense, it's sort of pointless to even make this claim. However, nowadays I would argue many people have that we live in a kakistocracy, which is ruled by the worst. So anyways, that's my political inclination. So I'm trying to be objective as I can in this very controversial political ideology. So here, I asked ChatGPT to define very briefly what is fascism. So it says fascism is a far-right authoritarian political ideology characterized by strong nationalism, centralized power, suppression of dissent, and after militarism, with the state and leader elevated above individual rights. It seeks to unify the nation through dictatorial control, mass mobilization, and the exclusion or persecution of perceived enemies. So this is just I think it's a okay definition briefly uh, put, because there is authoritarian, sure, I guess. It believes in authority. It's not like, hippie, airy fairy stuff or something. And nationalism, certainly. Centralized power, yes. And suppression of dissent, sure. And militarism, well, I guess, but that applies to, many ideologies. Even, more like a, democracy that is supposedly less militaristic, but look at the world for the past 100 years. Yeah, 100. Did I say 100 days? 100 years is being quite militaristic. Anyways, and the state and leader elevated above individual rights. Well, I would say this applies to many non-fascistic societies nowadays as well, except that, in the modern world, it's not always just the state. Sometimes multinational corporations seem to have even more power than the state, which, I wouldn't say is a good thing. But yeah, I'm not a fan of strong state, but that's usually how societies end up at some point. But like, just look at the previous pandemic. The certain drug companies seem to be able to dictate to governments to do as to do their bidding and stuff. But yeah, and persecution of perceived enemies, suppression of dissent. This is also not exclusive to Nazism. This has been going on, in modern day Western world. They're planning on, like in Germany, they want to ban AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland party, that is supposedly Nazi-ish. I'm not sure how Nazi that party actually is, but some have argued it is. Or America, how MAGA has been demonized for the last decade almost, and so on. But anyway, this is just a definition, so basically to get it out of the way. So, but still, I think a better way of defining fascism is like the look at historically what led to the rise of fascism. And I should point out that usually fascism and national socialism or Nazism, they are equated. That national socialism is just one aspect of fascism, but I think some actual proponents of the ideology, they like to make a big distinction between the two, but I'm just gonna use them mostly, referring to the same thing. I'm not an expert in the matter, but let's just look at the history, especially like Germany, Italy, and Spain, just briefly. Like the conditions in society was like, there was high inflation and bad economy, and then there were also like communists or socialists, also trying vying for power, and sort of fascism arose as a force to oppose communism or socialism. And there was also rampant perversion, degeneracy, sexual immorality, and so on, like nowadays, and also weakening national identity. So fascism was sort of invented to battle these social problems. And in that sense, it's, even though like fascism is a quite modern ideology, it has been around, like it was invented around 100 years ago, or whenever. So it is a modern thing, but it's still it is quite traditional in that sense. Like it sought to preserve traditional way of life using modern means, I guess you could say. And especially Weimar Germany, before the rise of the mustache man and stuff, they, especially nowadays, modern America has been especially compared to the Germany of that era, with similar problems like inflation sexual degeneracy and stuff. Like, the first transgender clinic or sex change clinic was in Berlin in 1920s or whenever, and it was shut down by the Nazis. um, or like, in Spain, um, in Spain, the just talking about, Spain, it's difficult to say that, that fascism wasn't, at least the lesser of two evils, because like the socialists or communists there were like killing nuns and doing stuff like that, and then, normal people were against it, so they rather sided with the fascists and stuff. So, despite the very negative reputation, you have to see these different things in context. But yeah, that's basically what has given, um, in the past gave rise to fascism, and some of that is very um, apparent today as well. Like, similar patterns are emerging in society. So let's say, like, why is fascism or national socialism becoming popular nowadays? Well, I think there's like three different levels to it. First is that nowadays the left, and sometimes even the, more moderate right, calls anybody they don't like a Nazi. And, eventually, at first people were like, oh my god, I'm not a Nazi, please don't call me a Nazi. But over the course of time, people noticed that, well, actually, these lefties, they're much worse than um, the Nazis in some ways, or the fascists and stuff. And so, yeah, they don't want to identify with the left, so then they want to identify as the opposite of. So it's sort of like, just counter reaction. So they might, pay lip service to the ideology, but are not true believers, as it were. And then there's just, being edgy, because, back in the 90s when I was a teenager and stuff, if you wanted to be edgy, you would either, draw swastikas or do the Roman salute, or draw pentagrams and say, hail Satan or something. And nowadays, I don't like, Satanism is not so edgy anymore, but now I guess being a Nazi is even more edgy. So I think some people are drawn to it simply because of that. Like, maybe they're not true believers either, but they do think it's, they just like the edgy feeling. They don't want to be too, nice. They don't want to play along with everybody. They want to be, stand out, like a sore thumb or something. And of course, back in the 90s already, like I said, it was edgy to be Nazi or something, or like, I don't think many people were actually Nazis. They just, occasionally draw a swastika or something for fun. But yeah, it wasn't, because nowadays, being Nazi was, in the mainstream still is like the worst thing ever. But I guess it was worst thing ever as well. But the degree of, like, audacity was lesser. But anyways, and then the third way is, of course, that, some people are actual believers in national socialism or fascism or something. And then, of course, it goes to, you can ask the question: are they misguided? Are they hateful? Are they driven simply by hate, as the mainstream media likes to call them? Or are they actually correct? Or is it, is it the solution? And I'm gonna look at some of these questions a bit in my ramble. But first, let's look at the cons of Nazism, or the bad sides. So first is notoriety. So of course, even though, like I said, it's gaining popularity, at least, on the internet and stuff. Because, like, I'm not a Nazi, but some of my friends on Twitter are. I don't know what degree they are, like, but the 3 degrees I just mentioned. But still, in the normisphere, especially, Nazi is still a very negative, has very negative connotation. So that's, if you want to, reform society, which is some that is a goal I certainly agree with. There are many issues in contemporary society and they should be fixed, and that's one theoretical way of doing it, to to, to reform society, to this sort of political system. But one hurdle would simply be that, if you're going to use any label that makes you sound like a Nazi, many people will just, they won't even listen, even if you had some good arguments. um, then and then there's, of course, excessive national pride or patriotism that can, of course, be harmful. But that sort of anything excessive can be bad. Drinking too much water can be bad. Like, drinking water is usually good, but there was that, one mother who entered some competition to drink water to win a Wii, Nintendo Wii for her children, and she drank too much water and died from it. So it's like, so this is like, yeah, and excessive patriotism. You can say that, George Bush's crusade in the Middle East, it was also labeled as patriotism, even though it's difficult to see how does it was it patriotic for Americans to go to the other side of the world to, bomb a bunch of people. But anyways, it can be used as a negative weapon, whether you're fascist or not. And then there's, of course, Gestapo, or secret police or something, because the image people have of the fascists, especially Nazis, is that they had the Gestapo always listening, and if you said something bad against the state or some, they would drag you off into a camp or something. And yeah, that is an issue. But once again, that's very much it was a thing in, Soviet Union or DDR, East Germany, back in the Cold War, and it's sort of an issue nowadays, especially because the surveillance technology has greatly improved in the last few decades, with the, I'm being listened to all the time on my phone, and so are you if you have a cell phone and stuff, or at least potentially listened to. And so this is also like, these things, like, yes, that it's bad if the, state is always listening on you and gonna punish you for doing something, but it's not exclusive to Nazis, unfortunately. Like, if it was, then it was just like, okay, stay away from Nazis. But unfortunately, other political systems can also be guilty of it. And then there's all sorts of, war crimes that are associated with fascists and stuff. That's another thing. The Nazis or the fascists are not the only ones capable of war crimes. And of course, the Holocaust has a very a special place in people's minds on this, and I'm not going to say much about it. Well, it's I don't want to, getting drunk here, and don't want to get my tongue tied or say something I shouldn't say. But, like, of course, the Nazis harmed a lot of, put Jews and other people into camps, and many of them died. That's certainly a fact. And but I just, but they weren't the only ones who have done harm to innocent people, um, in history or even recent history. But I just think it's strange how, the when talking about Holocaust is usually nowadays, especially, it's used as like the original sin of whiteness, instead of, like, you don't really see the, other side of the story. Like, they don't celebrate Americans or Russians or British and whoever, who liberated the Jews from the camps. They should be, because you'd think that, these people would be celebrated as great heroes, and especially Jews would be grateful to Americans and Russians for saving them. But you still see that, even supposedly Americans, they're Nazis and or, or are labeled as Nazis and horrible people. But that's a bit strange to me. But yeah, war crimes usually bad and atrocities and stuff. But once again, it's not exclusive to fascists, and maybe they were even worse than other war crimes, maybe. But you'd really have to look at it objectively to come any proper conclusion on that particular question. And then there's of course book burning and censorship and meddling in arts and stuff. That's certainly, generally speaking, that's something I oppose. I generally speaking oppose censorship and stuff. But on the other hand, like especially looking at the entertainment industry in the past decade with all the wokeness and stuff, every pretty much every franchise that I liked as a kid, Star Trek, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, they try to wokeify it and rewrite history. So it's like I've come to understand, like, blasphemy laws for religious stuff because of that maybe there should be some sort of control that the you know t- that the people with the money wouldn't just be able to ruin whatever you have that that was nice in the past, that they try to rewrite the history and make it opposite, like turn the message to the opposite of what it used to be. And also, like, supposedly, I think some of the books they burned, like the Nazis and stuff. They were like communist propaganda and some porn and stuff like that. So it's like it's, generally speaking, yes, I disagree with censorship and even book burning. Like, personally, I don't think that if it's some sort of harmful propaganda I disagree with, I don't think it should be burned. I think it should be, like, um, archived. So you can point out, like, this is the horrible kind of stuff these people are promoting. Like, nowadays you see some supposed school books promoting homosexuality or blowjobs or whatever stuff like that. I don't think this, like, the book should certainly be kept away from children, but they shouldn't be burned. They should be used as evidence for the crimes against humanity of some of these people. But yes, this censorship is not exclusive to fascists, certainly not. We see it nowadays, it's also in communist nations and so on. So, but yeah, once again, it would be nice if all of these were exclusive to fascism, because then it would be much easier to avoid them. But alas, that's not the case. And then there's this thing. Nowadays, some people would say this is not a bad thing, but no, race mixing is generally uh, frowned upon, especially in National Socialist Germany was. And like, okay, I don't think I've said this publicly, but my wife is Asian, I'm Finnish, and my kid is mix. So in that sense, I certainly would not like my kid to be, I don't know, sent to a camp or something simply because of his genetic history. But I don't know if most of the how how far would they believe in this ideology. But hey, that's not to say that I promote any kind of, like, willy-nilly miscegenation either. Like, the if you heard about the Coudenhove Kalergi plan, like he was some, I think, like half Austrian, half Japanese guy who lived like 100 years ago, and he wanted to, like, Europe to become some mongrelized mess to that to genetically breed Europeans with other races or something. I guess that's I think this was his some trauma of his that he wasn't accepted in society back in those days. But yeah, I'm certainly not a proponent of anything like that. And the way I see it, most people, as I would say this applies especially those very anti-racist leftists. They still like to be with their own kind. Like very very few people actually like to marry somebody from a completely different culture and stuff. Um, but yeah, the Coudenhove Kalergi, he, because nowadays some people say that the EU or something, they're actually following his plan, and I don't know whether that's true, but there's clearly the replacement theory is clearly there's some truth to it, as we can see from just recently the American Indian immigration saga that I'm gonna discuss soon. And of course they want to, for some reason they want to replace Western Europeans, people of European stock, with people from other parts of the country. So I certainly oppose that, but it's like let's move on to the immigration. I'm gonna talk about like the pros of Nazism or fascism, the good sides. So no mass immigration, like the saga with Elon Musk going unhinged due to um, people not being a fan of him bringing millions of Indians to America to take tech jobs and all of that stuff with the H-1B visa stuff. Like, so like nobody wants millions of Indians to come to their country, and I hold no particular animosity towards Indians personally, but I would not want Indians to millions of Indians to come to Finland or any other Western country, or any other country except India, really, because just like why would they have to? Like I don't have any qualms with some immigration, but it's understandable that nowadays the people become more radicalized and or more extreme, that a lot of people say that there should be zero immigration to Europe or America or anything because of too much immigration in the past decade or so. But just to sort of differentiate the two two kinds of immigration. Like first, I would be perfectly fine. Let's say like an Indian or an Iraqi guy comes to Finland, and because he loves sauna or sauna, or and I don't know, Finnish alcohol and Finnish heavy metal music and movies or whatever, and he's really into Finland and wants to learn the language and stuff. I have no problem with at all with that sort of immigrant, or somebody who is not that enthusiastic. But if it's an individual, even though if they are from a racially very separate culture, I'm not really opposed to that. But there's a big difference between when huge groups of people come, and especially when it's the your governments are behind it, like they are promoting this mass immigration. That's a completely different story, because if there's political motivations behind it, then it's going to be very harmful to your society, and maybe even also the society that is losing all these people, especially for the best tech bros from India go to America. What's going to happen to Indian tech industry and all that? And just to point out, like let's say you have medieval England, which is like 99.9% white and English, or maybe Anglo-Saxon or whatever, and then you have I don't one Arab guy moves to London, That's not gonna cause any problems, especially like, if that Arab guy is actually an asshole who starts murdering people or committing crimes. In that society, the people wouldn't take it, and they would, punish him. But unfortunately, in modern England, that it's not just one Arab guy; it's millions, and some of them, when they commit crimes, the government is trying to cover it up or protect him and stuff instead of punishing him, and then they punish the people who complain about the crimes this person committed. And that also, I would say, it applies to miscegenation or race mixing. Personally, I do not think that few people like my son of being a mixed ancestry is not gonna cause upheaval in society, but certainly if millions and millions of people do it, yeah, it's gonna degrade the social cohesion of your country. But yeah, and this is just to point out, like, this is, I was supposed to be talking about fascism, like, the let's say that any country that would have a fascist or Nazi government, they would not allow this sort of mass immigration, especially from non-European nation to a European nation. That's a given. And you may hate Nazism or love or hate Nazism, but this is a fact. And I've never been a fan of mass immigration, and you don't have to be even a racist to oppose it, but it certainly helps. But it's simply, it would have been common sense. Like, you don't have, also, you didn't have to be Nazi. Like, let's go back to medieval England. They weren't a fascist or something, but they also wouldn't have allowed mass immigration to their country. Or, well, they did when William the Conqueror came, but he conquered England. But yeah, that's basically what it is. Mass immigration is conquest. Let's move on to the next. So, no LGBT. If let's say the Axis had won the World War II, I don't think we would be having gay pride parades in pretty much every European country nowadays, or at least Western or Northern European country. And that is not to say that I would support sending gay people to camps or anything like that. It's just well, it is obvious that it has you know gone too far from merely tolerating to sort of forcing it on you, because and I've said this before, but there's the term heteronormativity. It's hinted like it's a bad thing, but heteronormativity just means, because hetero is normal, that heterosexual unions between a man and a woman lead to offspring, or at least potentially lead to offspring, and it perpetuates the species, the human species. But if you have a homosexual union, it cannot perpetuate the species unless you do some weird, get some host body for two gay guys or host woman or something. But normally, that's why we have heteronormativity, and it's normal, and that's why it should be celebrated in society more than gay pride, in my honest opinion. So, and that's one last thing I would prefer about fascism, that they wouldn't be very pro LGBT, especially since back in my day it wasn't LGBT, it was gay rights or something, you know but that's a separate issue. I don't want to go on that tangent. So, okay, no usury in, or let's just look at Germany, because in the 1920s, in the Weimar Republic, Germany had high inflation, economy was really bad, people had to use wheelbarrows full of cash just to go buy bread. Like, it sounds like a cartoon or something, but as far as I know, it was true. and there were like mother daughter prostitution pairs on the street and stuff. You know, sort of like I guess that was that era's version of OnlyFans. But yeah, so but anyway, so and that those, I don't think those pairs were because the people liked it so much. Is like the prostitutes themselves, is because they didn't have money and they were forced to do whatever so they could fill their bellies. So yeah, but when the mustache man won the election and he became the chancellor in Germany, then economy for the regular working man and woman, it started going much better, and life for the average German improved greatly. There's even a Star Trek episode about this, like the original series from the 60s, about like some that's where I learned about this first. Yeah, you can Google it. Star Trek Nazi episode. Watch it. Is interesting. So yeah, and I'm not saying they're like means they're like economically would be the best thing ever, but clearly they prioritize the people over multinational corporations. That's how it seems to me. Sorry for that. My son woke up and is crying. Maybe you can hear it. Yeah, excuse me. I'll try to do this quickly. So where were I? National pride. So yeah, nowadays, if you are from a European nation, you are or a nation of European ancestry, then you are, you have white privilege, you have your bad, blah blah blah. But back in those, I don't think they would have this problem. But just to point out, it's not exclusive to fascists to have national pride. Ancient Rome, they were even better at national pride, I'm pretty sure, than the Nazis or something, and or medieval European nations and so on. But it's just in modern contemporary nations seem to have this problem that is seen as bad thing to have national pride. Okay. And of course, then there's no porn and other degeneracy, or at least not excessive porn. And I'm not one of those guys who says that um, porn should be banned altogether. It's just it's gone too far in our society. Like is promoted too much, and like OnlyFans and stuff, and it's offered as the easy solution for a young woman to get money and all that stuff. But I don't think that would be so tolerated in fascist societies. But this also applies for many other older kinds of societies. Like, hey, maybe Rome would have been much more tolerant on this issue. I can't say for sure, but sort of just got the idea. But certainly, medieval Europe wouldn't be so tolerant over this sort of stuff. But still, I think a little bit of lewdness is fine, like this one. Like, if a society were to ban stuff like this, like, as you can see here, bit of skin, that I think that's going too far in the, uptight direction. But maybe it's not good to have stuff like this on bus stops. Like, you should sort of limit it where you see it, and so on. So I don't want to sound too prudish, certainly, and I remember years ago, Ramsey Paul, like the YouTuber, he made a video about moral gray areas, how they're good. And I think porn is one of those things. Like you shouldn't celebrate it. It's not a great thing, but neither should you kick down people's doors if to see if they're hiding porn USB sticks under their floorboards or the bed or something. It's like it's something like you sort of tolerate it but you don't like it. I think some issues are like that, like porn. And then there's a couple of misconceptions about Nazis particularly that I want to address. So first is that they supposedly tried to take over the world, like Lebensraum, living space. That's Mustache Man's idea. But how about the British Empire that controlled half of the world? Sort of still around the time that Mustache Man came into power, and other European nations, French, Dutch, Spanish, they spread quite a lot, but not so many. Spanish. I mean, not so much German spoken outside of Europe. So it because when Hitler invaded Poland, it wasn't to take over the world. It was because there were some areas where he claimed that used to be German, I think, and that he claimed that they were abusing German people of German ancestry. Whether that was true or he was used this as an excuse, but it doesn't mean that he was trying to take over the world. And the other one is the claim that the Nazis hated anybody who is not blue-eyed or blonde, and that's propaganda. Like of course they had the preference that that's the ideal kind of person, but they didn't seek to gas everybody who was different. It's like oh yeah, that was just the previous illustration of the taking over the world war of conquest. But then I have this quote from the mustache man himself. I'll open it for myself so I can actually read it. So he said, "Pride in one's race, and that does not imply contempt for other races, is also normal and healthy sentiment. I have never regarded the Chinese or the Japanese as being inferior to ourselves. They belong to ancient civilizations, and I admit freely that their past history is superior to our own. They have the right to be proud of their past, just as we have the right to be proud of the civilization to which we belong. Indeed, I believe the more steadfast the Chinese and Japanese remain in their pride of race, the easier I shall find it to get on with them." So yeah, at least this guy, according to his own words, if this quote is accurate, didn't hate people simply because they were of different ethnicities, especially they sided with the Japanese in the war and stuff. So yeah, I think it's basically it was war propaganda or something to simplify. Like they had said that they had a preference for certain kinds of people, but so do most societies. Okay, since I'm talking about fascists and stuff, I should discuss the so-called Jewish question just briefly. I don't want to go too deeply into it, and I've already probably gotten myself into trouble with this, so don't want to say too much. But one thing I want to first point out that nowadays you associate Nazi with anti-Semitism, but there's a quote unquote proud tradition throughout most of Europe of such behavior. Like the Nazis weren't the first ones to have problems with Jews. Like they've been expelled from England in like 1290, or also in France and in Spain, 1492, when they then the Spanish Golden Age started. Like Isabel, Greek Queen Isabella, she and King Ferdinand, they expulsed is that the word, whatever, Jews. And also Portugal soon followed, and also in Germany in the and Holy Roman Empire in the 14th century, Italy, Austria, Hungary, Poland, Sweden. even Switzerland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway have had some restrictions on Jews, and then Jews were accused of spreading the Black Death back in the day and stuff. So just that's historical continuum, you could say. And I would say that this animosity towards Jews is, or this let's say this critical view is probably partially earned and partially unfair, because nowadays historians seem to say it's it's completely wrong or something. But like it's difficult to say that I wasn't there, but I wouldn't say it's 100%. Either party isn't probably 100% there, the guilty party. Like Jews have been a minority in Europe for centuries or thousands of years and have a strong identity. And when different cultures and religions are close to each other, they tend to clash. And but despite that, Jews have persisted, and many other religious groups didn't. Like when Christianity took over Europe, pretty much all of the pagan religions disappeared, but still Jews persisted. So that's, I guess, something they have tenacity, you could say. But yeah, anyway, so the mustache man and the Nazis, they blame Jews for economic problems, pushing sexual immorality, controlling media, and so forth. And I would certainly say that um, what's the yeah, expulsions, yeah. But I would say that it's like Jews are overrepresented in certain um, fields, even nowadays, like some economic stuff or pornography, or there's APAC, of course, in U.S. politics and so forth. But I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it's necessarily fair to say they control it, but they're certainly overrepresented in some of these matters. So I do think it should be discussed, but with a in a civilized manner. And of course, I'm not a fan of Israel. Israel delenda est. Um, but yeah, so then my I guess closing argument. So the why I sort of wanted to make this video is that currently only Nazis or so-called Nazis seem to be offering proper solutions to many of these issues, such as mass immigration, excess moral decay, or economic problems. Um, because other political views, they tend to be poo-pooing um, the people who have these concerns, like it's not a big deal, just don't worry about it. And like traditional conservatives seem to care more about GDP, or acting like liberals from like a decade or two ago, instead of actually being conserving anything, except the thing that liberals already went further left a long time ago. But I think that especially those who the staunchest opposers of Nazis should take heed, because if they really hate Nazis, they should come up with alternative solutions to these problems, like mass immigration and stuff. Because if history repeats itself, we're gonna same things gonna happen now that happened almost 100 years ago in few European countries. Because if the other political ideologies, they keep ignoring the problems, they just keep feeding the Nazis. And personally, I just want to see these problems solved, like massive immigration or moral decay and so on. um, but whether you do it with there's an old well, not so old, but some Chinese saying that it doesn't matter if it's a white cat or a black cat, as long as it catches the mice, it's a good cat. So that's what I believe in. So Yeah, that's like I'm not a believer in the system, but and certainly, like anybody else, I grew up hating any kind of fascism, Nazism, and stuff. But now it's like, okay, if they are the only ones really pushing solutions, at least we should listen to them. Um, but of course, the question is that who should be the king then? Like, okay, if you're gonna have any kind of major political overhaul, who's gonna be the king? Like, who would be a leader to be trusted? Because, like any other ideology, it could be corrupted. Even, let's say for a sake of the argument that is actually the best political system out there. Because, to its credit, fascism wasn't really, it didn't collapse on its own. It was defeated in a war. Uh, Except, Spain is an exception in that sense, sort of. But anyway, so if it, let's say for the sake of argument, it's the best system out there. Like, we still need to, like, who would be the good leader? Because especially a system like that needs a good leader. If you basically give the government more power, even, like, willingly and stuff. Of course, this also applies to pretty much any political system and stuff. But the way I see it, like I said, I try to be neutral, and so also give, the benefit of the doubt to, fascists and and so on. And I try to see these people as that, they are pro Europe. Like, despite the political ideology, they do care about Europe, or, countries with European ancestry or history and so forth, and like I do too. So this is like, I guess that's the to distill the essence of it. That's how I see it. Like, whether their ideology would actually function in the end is secondary, in that sense. That, I do think most of these people, they have good intentions. Whether these good intentions lead to hell, as the saying goes, I can't say. But that's my 2 cents about it. So yeah, and. So at least, in that sense, it's certainly positive that this, so-called new rise of fascism in the Western world is that it's gonna force people to have these discussions about these relevant issues like immigration, nationalism, and all that stuff. Because, if the fascists are the only people who seem to care about it, then they will get power, or gonna cause, I don't know, civil wars or whatever. Um, that's just my 2 cents. But yeah, I don't know if anybody's gonna agree with me on this one. Like, for some, I'm of course, halfway fascist myself, and the others, I'm more, I don't know, I'm not far right enough or whatever. So yeah, but I don't really have anything else to say. Of course, there's many, details I could nitpick into and stuff, but, that was my um the basic ideas what I wanted to say, and I think I said them, and it's up to you to decide whether what you think about it and stuff. And so I'm Adventure Argonaut. Happy New Year. I guess the soju is getting into me a bit. So yeah, Happy New Year. Thanks for watching, and tomorrow I'm gonna stream some game again, but I've been thinking of doing something different for a while. Like, next week, I will probably do more golden news stuff, but I want them to branch out to more, like, more specific issues, and not just, temporarily restricted to the passing week, but still somewhat related to it. But yeah, that I'm gonna end the stream. Thanks for watching. Bye bye. Bye bye. Gonna sail my ship to the seven seas. I don't know. I'm not a pirate. Arr. Well, I was yesterday. I played Monkey Island, so that's good enough for me.